Okay, so by now, if you have pulled for Lacrimosa, you probably have moderately built her, and are probably enjoying her damage over time gameplay. In this video, however, we will go over 3 teams and rotations that I have tested and have found to be her strongest. A disclaimer being, testing for these teams was done on the media server. If there are any changes to this information for these rotations, it will be detailed in the comments. Okay, so this is post-edit KindCruelty. I have yet to identify any changes to these rotations on the live server, so let us dive right into it. A whopping 99% of the people watching my NTE videos are not subscribed. Do the right thing, subscribe to KindCruelty. The first team we'll be going over is the Lacrimosa Scorch team. The core of this team being Lacrimosa and Sakiri. Your third teammate for this can be Adler or Baikang. However, Baikang does require some field time, which can extend your rotation. For this team, it is actually advised to have no skill recorded for Lacrimosa. It is best to remove the skill as Lacrimosa deals 5 stacks of Nightmare with her base skill. The fourth teammate is a flex slot that you could use based on whatever you may need. You would ideally use this flex unit at the start or at the end of the rotation, depending on your needs. Hotori at the start to start the recording, Haniel at the start for the attack buff or Fadia for the protection. After them, you can swap to Lacrimosa to start the rotation below. The rotation is being showcased on stage 12 of the Ghost Train. For this rotation, it is best for Lacrimosa to be in the ranged form. However, Ghost Train can switch your mode to melee at the start. This will be taken into account in our rotation. So the rotation would go as follows. You start off with Lacrimosa in the melee mode and swap to the ranged mode. When the swap animation starts, you can then swap to Sakiri and use her ultimate. After the ultimate, you can use her skill. You can cancel the animation of her skill by swapping to Adler. With Adler, you do the same thing. You use his ultimate and then his skill, and then you can cancel the animation of his skill by swapping to Lacrimosa. The reason you start with the ultimate before the skill is to ensure that you can accumulate some ultimate energy when you use the skill after the ultimate. It isn't a lot of energy, but it goes a long way in your train journey. Once back to Lacrimosa, you use her skill, and before she can do the slow animation of her 5th basic attack, you cancel that out by using her ultimate. Cancelling out the 5th basic attack is something we will do constantly throughout this rotation. This increases the speed of the rotation and ensures that you have more opportunities to use the skills and basic attacks deal more damage for her with less time used. After you use the ultimate, you will use Lacrimosa's basic attacks until you feel her cycle meter. In about 3 rotations of the 4 basic attacks, assuming no interruptions, your cycle meter should be filled. This is when you start repeating the rotation. You swap to Sakiri to trigger Scorch and use her skill, then to Adler and use his skill, then back to Lacrimosa. At this point, you use your ultimate whenever it is available. You also swap to Lacrimosa whenever Adler or Sakiri have their cycle meters full to trigger the Scorch, then continue your rotation. Some things to be cognizant of, as the enemy will be attacking you. Whenever you perform a perfect dodge, you will perform a dodge counter that will bring about the rain of tomato you are familiar with from the 4th basic attack. When you see these, it is best to dodge cancel as the slow animation from the 5th basic will follow shortly after. Again here, we do want to skip the 5th basic attack, so we will use 4 basic attacks on a loop while cancelling the 5th basic attack with the dash. A good visual cue for when you dash cancel would be the moment you start seeing the tomato rain. You dash cancel to cancel the 4th basic attack. When you dash at this point, you will still get the rest of the damage from the 4th basic attack. The second team that we'll be going over is the Nova team. I will not pretend that there aren't a few Lacrimosa havers who do not have the Sakiri. This team here is for you. If for any reason you don't have the Sakiri, you can use this Nova team, which has Lacrimosa, Haniel, and my dear Fadia. For this team, you can equip any mob for your redirect skill, as your main focus is no longer just pure nightmare stacks. I prefer the Tomato Devil, however you can go for the Black Tome if you prefer that. The start of this rotation is quite similar. You start off with Lacrimosa in the melee mode and you swap to the range mode. When the swap animation starts, you can swap to Haniel and use her ultimate. After the ultimate, you use her skill. You can swap cancel the animation of her skill by swapping to Fadia. With Fadia, you start with her skill and then her ultimate. As if you start with the ultimate and then follow up with the skill, you will cancel the enhanced mode she enters into. After the ultimate, you do the basic attack string until she exits the enhanced mode. This is when you swap back to Lacrimosa. Once back to Lacrimosa, you use her skill, and before she can do the slow animation of her 5th basic attack, you cancel that out by using her ultimate. After the ultimate, you use Lacrimosa's basic attacks until you feel her cycle meter. In about 3 rotations of the 4 basic attacks, assuming no interruptions, your cycle meter should be filled. This is when you start repeating the rotation. You swap to Haniel to trigger Nova and use her skill, then to Fadia and use her skill, then back to Lacrimosa. At this point, you use your ultimate whenever it is available, as well as the enhanced basics of Fadia. Fadia's cycle fills up quite fast, so she will assist with triggering Scorch often. And now on to the third and final team, which is the Discord team. Now this team has 2 forms. One for people who have the dupe of Lacrimosa and have activated her A6, another for those who do not have any dupes of Lacrimosa. Starting things off with the A6 dupe Lacrimosa team rotation, though the core teammates do not change between the A6 and the A0 teams. You want to have Lacrimosa, Sakiri and Fadia. These are your core teammates. The start of this rotation is also quite similar. You start off with Lacrimosa in the melee mode and swap to the ranged mode. When the swap animation starts, you can then swap to Sakiri and use her ultimate. After the ultimate, you can use her skill. You can then swap cancel the animation of her skill by swapping to Fadia. With Fadia, you start with her skill and then her ultimate. After the ultimate, you do 1 basic attack string until she exits the enhanced mode. This is when you swap back to Lacrimosa. With Lacrimosa, this time things change. You start with her ultimate before using her mob skill. Yes, this requires a mob skill to be learned in order to trigger the A6. You then use her skill and quick swap to Fadia. Once on Fadia, you swap to Sakiri before quickly returning to Lacrimosa. This quick swap you do here is to ensure that Sakiri is the person who uses Lacrimosa's A6 and triggers Scorch. Once you are back to Lacrimosa, you do the 4 basic attacks and cancelling until both her skill is ready and her cycle is filled. When the cycle is ready, you cast the skill and quick swap to Fadia. Doing this triggers the Nova. You swap to Sakiri and then immediately swap to Lacrimosa, triggering the Scorch and the Discord. You can swap to Fadia and use her skill and then to Sakiri to use hers, then go back to Lacrimosa to auto attack and apply as much nightmare as you can. This is where the rotation then repeats, where you auto attack with Lacrimosa until both her skill and her cycle is filled, then quick swap to Fadia for Nova, then Sakiri and back to Lacrimosa for Scorch and Discord. You can use the ultimate of Sakiri and Fadia when it is available, but it is best not to use them during the quick swap period where you trigger Nova and Scorch in quick succession. Now, if you have an A0 Lacrimosa and are wondering if your rotation will be as quick swap heavy as the A6 one, the answer is sort of no. However, your star of the show is the Fadia, as she will help you ensure that you can also rotate and trigger Discord. For this team, it is identical to the first team we introduced, being the Scorch team. You use Lacrimosa, Sakiri and Adler. However, you add Fadia for the Nova and Discord reaction. This team isn't as swap heavy as the A6 one before. You start off with Lacrimosa in the melee mode and swap to the ranged mode. When the swap animation starts, you can swap to Sakiri and use her ultimate. After her ultimate, you can use her skill. You can swap cancel the animation of the skill by swapping to Adler. With Adler, you do the same thing. You use his ultimate and his skill, and then you swap cancel to Fadia. With Fadia, you start with her skill and then her ultimate. After the ultimate, you do 1 basic attack string until she exits the enhanced mode. This is when you swap back to Lacrimosa. Lacrimosa uses her skill and her ultimate, then does the basic attack string until her cycle is ready. When the cycle is ready, you swap to Sakiri to trigger the Scorch. You use her ultimate, then skill, and quick swap to Adler to do the same. Then you swap to Fadia. You skill and then ult and use her basic attacks until her cycle is filled. This will not take long to fill, as we had already done an ultimate and a basic attack cycle on her before. When it fills up, you quickly swap to Lacrimosa. This will trigger Nova and the discard. Once on Lacrimosa, you are back to the start of the rotation and can rinse and repeat. So, if you made it this far, a like and subscribe would be appreciated. Just a reminder that 99% of people who watch my NTE videos are not subscribed to the channel, so a sub would be appreciated. Until the next one, cheers.